Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Kick-Ass, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Mark Strong, Chloe Grace Moretz, and Nicolas Cage, and directed by Matthew Vaughn. Now before I get into this review, I want to say right off the bat, I saw this movie the first time in movie theaters when it came out back in 2000, I think 10 or 11. I think it was 2010, but could be wrong. And I remember loving it back then, and then I wanted to see it again, and it was just poof, gone. And then I went to an AMC theater one day after I saw Robin Hood, and went back and saw this movie with a friend of mine. So, what did I think of this movie again this time? Let's get into it. We open the movie with a man that is not Dave Lazuski, which I'll talk about in a minute, pretending to be a superhero, and then it turned out he had some mental issue problems, which is brilliant turn of events, and with the narration of Dave Lazuski, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's going to be a Quicksilver in the Avengers series, which I'll talk about next year. Who's in high school as an average, ordinary kid with Todd, played by future X-Men Quicksilver, named Evan Peters, an X-Men version of Quicksilver. And Marty, played by Clark Duke, who's only in comedies that I mostly know him from, is a great setup for our protagonist as well as his friends and other characters. I also love the introduction of our antagonist, Chris D'Amico, played by McLovin from Superbad, 10 years old by the way, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, where he shows up at the comic book store / coffee shop with his bodyguard who says, "Fuck off." Is a total brilliant and unexpected moment in the film. His father Frank, played by Mark Strong, who was having a month in 2010 with this and Robin Hood, as I brought up earlier, has a funny moment with a guy named Trey where he says the guy who stole his cocaine looks like Batman. Just brilliant, and we'll talk about that when we get into Nicolas Cage's character. I also like the introduction of Mindy McCready, played by Chloe Grace Moretz, and her daddy, played by Nicolas Cage, who I've never really enjoyed as an actor too much, but I'll talk about it more when I get to Ghost Rider, who teaches her vigilantism, which is bad parenting for her case after her mother dies and gives birth to Mindy, and daddy is in prison, which we'll find out until later in the movie. It's just a great way to know who the characters are. After the events of Kick-Ass's first training, Dave goes to the hospital. And after he gets out of the hospital, he gets asked by Katie Doma to go get some coffee, which is also the same comic book / coffee shop that they go to. Which is a good idea for the hero to get the girl from school as the hero protagonist's girlfriend. It's great. Kick-Ass tries to find a cat named Mr. Bitey, which leads to his popularity after he falls and then beats up some muggers that are trying to kill off some guy, and cameras are shown of him beating the shit out of the muggers. It's a great moment for Kick-Ass getting popular these days. While we get Kick-Ass in a situation where Katie wants Razool, is the guy's name, to leave her alone, and Kick-Ass almost gets killed the second time. The first time was when he got hit by a car after the knife stabbing in the hospital. And we get introduced to Hit Girl and Big Daddy, who looks a hell of a lot like Batman with big guns. That's what I was talking about earlier with the guy that looks like Batman, in a funny action sequence where Hit Girl does all the killing of the bad guys. Daddy's partner Marcus, finding out the story I brought up a minute ago about the mother death and daughter born situation, is a pretty good character for a cop. Meanwhile, Frank killed an impersonator of Kick-Ass and finds out it wasn't the real Kick-Ass. Frank is smoking cocaine. Well, not smoking, but sniffing on cocaine, like this. That kind of a thing. And Chris becomes Red Mist, who wants to get a guy named Tony in prison. Red Mist is a good bad guy because he wants to meet up with Kick-Ass and to go to Frank's warehouse to get Kick-Ass killed. And as we get there, we find out Big Daddy burned up the place and killed Frank's men, based on how we see it from the teddy bear Then Frank decides to kill both Kick-Ass and Big Daddy after Red Mist shoots Hit Girl. And he makes Kick-Ass and Big Daddy's death live. Was sad, but in an awesome way to show Hit Girl as a badass. It's pretty neat. While Big Daddy kills Frank's men and burns the warehouse, I love the 28 Days Later score that pops up at that scene. It's pretty fucking creepy as hell, in my personal opinion. The final action sequence was awesome, especially when Kick-Ass flies and shoots all of Frank's men, including the bodyguard that said "fuck off" earlier. When Chris says, "Wait till they get a load of me," I thought that's from the 1989 film Batman. Was like, what a fucking ripoff, because Jack Nicholson would never watch this movie for that reason. Maybe he has seen it, I don't know, but if I were him, I wouldn't watch it for that reason. Like, at all whatsoever. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give the movie a 8.3 out of 10. This is a kick-ass movie with fun action and good characters, and I love the idea of Nicolas Cage as a Batman look-alike. But the movie was so entertaining and wild. A lot of unexpected things will happen in this movie. So I'll be back next week with Kick-Ass 2. And until next time, go kick some ass.